Today, I have the great honor of speaking with Sir Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister. Actually, Randy Otto has been playing Winston Churchill for 47 years. Absolutely phenomenal. You're going to hear about history. You're going to hear about the great quotes, and you're going to hear about leadership advice from Sir Winston Churchill. Enjoy. Today, I am extremely honored, and this is really the first time that I'm welcoming a prime minister, a former prime minister. Sir Winston Churchill has impersonated by Randy Otto. Randy, how are you?
I'm very well, Eric. Thank you. So good to see you, my boy.
This is obviously a podcast, and it's on Apple and on Spotify and everything, but it's also on YouTube. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you get a chance, you really, really, really need to go on YouTube and see that. And Randy, I really, really want to know how you start this, how you became a speaker and impersonating Winston Churchill, because your background is you're a financial advisor.
That's correct. It was completely by accident, Eric. All the most wonderful things in the world happened by accident. I was a sophomore in college. My British history professor did a spot-on impression of Winston Churchill, and I thought I could impersonate him impersonating Winston Churchill. And I had him down. I had him nailed in front of a group of students when he walked up behind me and surprised me. And as I turned, he said, "You know, Mr. Otto, you might have something there." And my life changed in an instant. I found my great mentor in life, and it happened to be this great professor who was published. His name was Dr. Maxwell Schoenfeld. I give him credit every single day for being able to see the world through the prism of Winston Churchill. He allowed me to do that. And I think to you business people out there, find those people in your life who know more than you do. You don't know as much as you think. Don't forget that. You don't know as much as you think you do. So go and find those people in life who know more than you do, or who can complement the knowledge that you have, and ask questions. Just right, Eric? Just ask as many as you can.
Absolutely. And I say that to my kids every time they come back from school. I said, which question did you ask today? And
what did you learn today? Right. Yeah.
But to your point of not knowing and looking for mentors, there's this French actor, Jean Gabin, which actually did a song one day, and the song was called I Know. And he was just saying, I'm 20 years old, I know. I'm 40 years old, I know. I'm 60 years old, I know. I'm 80 years old, I know. Then he said, now that I'm close to the end of my life, I know that I don't know. Which is beautiful.
It's beautiful. That is lovely.
And,
through life, I've had a number of great mentors in life as well.
Like whom, for instance?
Well, one of them was Hal Holbrook, who recently died, the great actor. He was 94 when he died, but of course, for those of you who don't know him, there's a certain age group who don't know him.
He was impersonating Mark Twain.
He impersonated Mark Twain, indeed, for I believe it was 64 years on stage as Mark Twain. He was discovered by Ed Sullivan in a club in New York and rocketed to fame. And I had a mental block, about 25 years ago, about Churchill. I was the king of the nursing homes and assisted living centers, where I got to meet the greatest generation, and Rotary clubs, and you name it. I was really hot in that market. And but I felt I was missing something. I wasn't getting my message across to as wide of an audience as I wanted to. And so I found Hal Holbrook, because my son, Max, and named him Max after my great teacher, came home one day. He said, "Dad, nobody knows what your license plate means." And of course, my license plate on my car says Winston. And he said, "They thought you sold cigarettes, or maybe you were a race car driver." And I said, "Well, you grew up with this, Max. What did you tell them?" And he started rattling off. Well, he was born in 1874. He was prime minister twice. And then he stopped himself. He was a freshman in high school. And I said, "Don't stop now, Max. You're doing great." He said, "No, Dad, you don't understand. I'm a teenager and I'm starting to sound like you. I can't do that." He said, but the bad news is nobody knew who Winston Churchill was when I started talking about him. I found out where Holbrook was performing that weekend. I called his secretary. Her name is Joyce Cohen. Hi, Joyce, if you're watching this. And she got us 4 tickets to see the great man at Southern Illinois University. I wound up in the green room, long story short, afterwards. He walked out and saw me standing there in line. I was daydreaming. I had no idea I was next in line when suddenly this voice rang out in his Mark Twain voice. He said, "You must be Mr. Churchill." And of course, I did me. And as I walked toward him, I went into Winston. I said, do you recall the night that we met, Mr. Twain? I believe it was December the 9th of 1900 at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. And Churchill and Twain did indeed meet once. Twain was introducing Churchill to his maiden speech in the United States, and he wanted to get to know the man better. And so they had quite a conversation behind closed doors, and many reporters trying to listen in with glasses, the way they did it in those days. Yeah. But both men had written about the encounter, both from very different point of views. Each of them thought they won the argument, so to speak, between the two of them. Churchill being the young buck and Twain being the old man, of course. And we recreated that entire conversation. We went on for about a half an hour, just out of thin air. Oh. I was Churchill, he was Twain. I wish I had a recording of it.
Yeah.
But he asked me to go sit down afterwards. And he said, I'll talk to you later. And he gave me the best advice, Eric, I've ever gotten. And that is this. He said, Randy, you don't really need a script. You know enough about Winston Churchill to where you can become Winston Churchill anytime you want. You can say anything you want. You can dredge him up. You don't need a script. All you have to do is tell the stories and string them together with segues, and you'll be doing this when you're my age.
Wow. And
that was the greatest advice I ever got.
And that has been now 47 years that you're impersonating with
47 years I've been doing this. And it's just, thank you. Thank you, Hal. God bless you, Hal. I know you're in heaven. He's a great guy. And so it's been a series of wonderful, fortunate incidents. And I guess what I would stress to the business people out there is don't lose track. Don't get so involved in the details that you lose track of grabbing those opportunities. Churchill said the pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, but the optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Yeah. I've got 8 principles that I do on stage in a piece that I call Winston Churchill CEO. Do it for groups, organizations, corporations, associations, you name it. We have lots of fun with it. And one of the things I try to stress is that you touch the troops. I think we were going to talk about that, weren't we?
Absolutely. And in a former episode on the Business of Meetings podcast, I interviewed Ivan Artoli, who's the current general manager of Hôtel de Paris in Monaco. And of course, we had to speak about Winston Churchill being there. I think that, and I've been personally quoting Winston Churchill many times this year. When people say, "What do you think? How are you coping with everything?" And I said, "Well, apparently, Sir Winston Churchill said, when you go through hell, keep going."
He had a number of very colorful phrases to encourage people to continue on. Of course, he had a lot of good quips. He said, Americans can always be counted upon to do the right thing after we've exhausted every other possibility. Of course, he could speak from truth because he was half American after all. His mother was American, his father was British. Mark Twain once said, "That makes the perfect man." So, all the way along, we can take a look at great leadership in history, but to me, he sets the standard because one man was able to stand up and really sway the course of history. Absolutely. To a certain extent. And the way he did it was he simply reminded the British people of who they were. He told the truth.
What did he tell them?
He told the truth. He told the truth, and they believed him, and as a result, they trusted him. So, and to me, that's the center point of leadership. Truth plus belief equals trust.
So what did he tell them? Let's hear it from Winston Churchill. What did he tell them?
Of course, he said, the very first speech he gave, just listen to these words. Do we have before us an ordeal of the most grievous kind? I have nothing to offer but blood, toil, tears, and sweat. You ask, what is our policy? I will say it is to wage war on the land, on the sea, and in the air with all our might, with all the strength that God can give us, to wage war against a monstrous tyranny, never before encountered in the dark, lamentable catalogue of human crime. That is our policy. You ask, what is our aim? I can say it in one word. It is victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory, however long and hard the road may be. For without victory, there can be no survival. First day on the job, just told them that
Amazing.
That's going to be a pretty tough slog.
Amazing. You give me goosebumps. Amazing. That's it. That's in that speech that he said, we shall never surrender, right?
Right. He said that too, of course. We shall fight them on the beaches. We shall fight them in the streets. We shall fight them on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender. You see, when you tell the people the truth, because he often said the British people are remarkable in this way, in that they love to hear bad news. seemed like he gave it to me. The worse, the better. And we as managers, we as business people, we cannot be afraid to tell our people bad news. Don't keep it inside, whatever you do. Sometimes Churchill had the ability, or he had the cooperation of the press, somewhat, back during World War II. Certainly before World War II, they were against him. But once he was the leader, and once they were in it together, so to speak, the press cooperated to a certain extent to where if something pretty bad happened, they were able to time out the next thing. Churchill wanted to don't give them all of the bad news all at once. It might demoralize people, but he knew his people. He knew they could take it, and wasn't afraid to give it to them.
And by the way, just not talking in terms of war, but managing a company, managing teams, managing people, I believe that the best way when something bad is happening or something difficult or bad news, just say it. That there's no way to try to hide, and actually you can gather the troops and get everyone fighting the bad news or the issue instead of trying to hide it or worse, something that I've seen and keep saying in different environments. It's when they throw people under a bus to cover their bottom to remain polite. That's such a lack of leadership, and people don't forget that. People remember, and people remember as well when you stand for them. And then,
and then people really recognize and I think appreciate when you take ownership. I think that's what you were getting at. Absolutely. Taking ownership if something does go wrong, or if there is a problem, you take ownership of it and you move on and you ask for people's help. I think some of the most powerful words in the English language are "I need your help."
Mm-hmm. I was told the three most difficult words to say are "I'm sorry," "I love you," and Worcestershire sauce, which I cannot even pronounce.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it either. It's all right. But Churchill, I want to share one thing with you about Churchill and leadership, and he had a very unique way of running a cabinet meeting. He was a painter. I don't know if your whole audience knows that. Behind me, you see Blenheim Palace, by the way. It's a picture I took when I was there a couple of years ago. But he had a painter's eye, over 500 oil paintings in his lifetime. And he used his painter's eye as a leadership technique. May I share it with you?
Please.
Please. We all know from Art 101 that when we look at a picture, we look at the focal point of the picture. Mm-hmm. For instance, behind me, the focal point might be one of those bushes in the back, one of those white bushes, or something, or a little red boat floating on the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's a focal point in a picture. Well, Churchill would choose a focal point. He knew where he wanted to go in a meeting, and he would focus on that focal point. And it might be something that most of his audience would think would be inconsequential. No, let's get to the real problem. Let's get to the big problem. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. And Churchill would stick to that one single point. You must focus on this point, and we've got to get that point taken care of, solved, find a solution for it, whatever it was. And he would not let go of it. He was like as the proverbial bulldog, as he was called. And sometimes he would take hours on this one single point until he exhausted his people. And then they would finally see that point as the focal point. And we all know from looking at a piece of art, when you actually focus on that one point, you see the whole picture, don't you?
Right, right.
And that's what Churchill was very successful at in those cabinet meetings when things got really tough.
Very interesting. And I've heard so many stories about him. By the way, one of the best biography that I read of him was actually written by a French guy, which quite knowing the relationship between France and England, quite kind of interesting. But they had so many phrases. It was very sharp, very quick. Probably not sometimes the most diplomatic person, but he could get things done.
He very much could. And of course, people ask me, what was the most difficult decision Winston Churchill had to make during World War II? And it was sinking of the French fleet in early July of 1940, of course. And he had to do it. The admiral, of course, was Vichy and would not give in. And the fleet, the British fleet was there. The French fleet was there at Mers al-Kabir. And he had to fire on them and sink the fleet. Only one ship escaped. Otherwise, if the Germans had gotten control of the French fleet, of course, it could have changed the war, especially in the Mediterranean. He cried for a week. Wow. And after the war, he met with some of the families of the sailors who had died there. And in the main, they all agreed and forgave him for doing it. They realized that he had no choice. And it gave him great solace that he was forgiven by many of those French people, many of those survivors of that horrible thing. Mm-hmm. But Churchill loved the French, but he spoke the language very poorly.
Mm. He could practice afterwards in Monaco, right?
He gambled very poorly as well. He loved to gamble, didn't he?
There's so many stories about him in Monaco and Hotel de Paris.
I appreciate just the fact that he would leave the room. Poor Clemmy, he'd come back for more money and more money and more money consistently, and she put up with him. Many's the time where they had a difficult time paying the bills because Churchill got a little carried away, especially at Baccarat. He loved that game. And as a result, I don't play it.
Right. Clever. Now, when you think about history, and that is a personal view, of course, but I draw a lot of parallel between Chamberlain, Daladier, and some of the leaders in the world the last 20 years here. But somebody like Winston Churchill, who quite frankly was not somebody that people would expect to become prime minister, and what he did and how he fought the Nazi and really got the island resisting and then finally helping to win the war. It's just fascinating to me how one human being can impact so many others.
Well, he never gave in. He noticed very early on, he was quoted as saying he thought he was the only person who read the English translation of Mein Kampf as early as he did, and realized that this is a roadmap to disaster. This man becomes the leader, and we better watch that leader. So he started very early on sounding the gong, but he had no proof. Of course, he had been relegated to the back benches after rising to Chancellor of the Exchequer in 1929. And then he was relegated to the back benches. They kept saying, remember Gallipoli. They blamed him for that. And they also said he's a little bit flaky. He rushes into things. He can't be trusted. He'll make mistakes. Don't listen to him. And of course, he made a living by writing. That's with his pen. And when he began being critical of the Germans and the Italians, he began losing the ability to be published by many newspapers and magazines. And despite that, he kept on. And then he was painting in Marseille. He has a beautiful painting that you can see online. Take a look at Winston Churchill, Marseille. You'll see the lovely coastline of Marseille. He painted from many angles, but he was painting at a chateau, and a man interrupted him. And the madam at the chateau said, "Do not interrupt Mr. Churchill while he's painting," but he did. He insisted on it. And this was a man by the name of Rafe Wigram. He worked in the Foreign Office, and he was in charge of monitoring the German munitions and their buildup. And he had proof for Winston, and he said, "Winston, you're the only one sounding off. You're the only one anybody will listen to. Would you like to see this information?" And he dropped everything at that moment, had the paints packed up, and headed back to England. And Mr. Wigram and Desmond Morton and several other patriots in the Foreign Office fed Churchill information that was true. And of course, unfortunately, the government was not telling the truth about the buildup. They kept saying, "Oh, we're exceeding the Germans in every form of production," when they weren't. And Churchill would rise from the back benches, and that's what he said: "Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. And courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And I got tired of listening." And he finally stood up, and with veracity, he had facts behind him, and he began to sway many of his compatriots, almost to the point to where it was too late, wasn't it, Eric?
Absolutely. Remember what he said to Chamberlain about willing to avoid war.
Right.
Can you say it again with the voice of Winston Churchill?
Well, you wanted peace, and therefore you shall have war. Isn't that what he said to Chamberlain? Why don't you say it?
Well, with my accent, no, that won't work. But I, if I'm not mistaken, when he became then prime minister, you would think that he would not talk to Chamberlain or not work with him. And actually, I think he was clever enough to incorporate him into his cabinet or some close advice.
Oh,
right?
Chamberlain. I thought you were talking about Tamberlane. You were way back in history.
That's why I am not trying to say anything with my
Chamberlain. Who the hell is Chamberlain?
It's like the Champs-Élysées instead of Champs-Élysées. So Chamberlain.
Say Worcestershire. Say Worcestershire. Go ahead. Knock yourself out.
Worcestershire. No, that doesn't work.
No, you can't do it. Well, what? Yeah.
So he became prime minister after Chamberlain, telling Chamberlain.
And he invited him into his cabinet. Yes.
Telling that they wanted to avoid war, and they will have end war and dishonor, right?
That's correct. Well, and he went on to actually give the eulogy at Chamberlain's funeral. The family asked Winston if he would do that, despite the fact that Chamberlain, of course, was his fiercest opponent prior to being asked into the cabinet September 1939 after Poland was attacked. They couldn't keep him out then, and it had been 10 years since he had been in the cabinet. It was quite a day. I don't know if you recall it, but he walked into he was asked to be in charge of the Admiralty. And that night he walked into the Admiralty, and a young lieutenant snapped to, said, "Sir, First Lord, sir, a message has been sent to the fleet." And Churchill responded, "Message? What message?" "Winston is back, sir." And Winston responded, "Bloody well right, Winston is back." And he never left, thank God. A lot of drama. One might say some people said, well, did he know how to play the press? Did he know how to orchestrate? He never orchestrated anything. He was just himself. He said what he meant and meant what he said. That's what I hope people will look back on and admire about him. I get the question all the time, is there another Churchill in the world? And I said, you have to look for his traits in your leaders. Find those traits of dead flat honesty, telling the truth, not being afraid. Difficult to do in this day and age, isn't it? With our social media and the rest of it.
Absolutely.
But I still think it's possible.
Are you okay if we finish this conversation with me asking you some question about management, leadership advice for small business owners, and you answer as the Prime Minister?
Oh, I'd be happy to. I would request everyone, would you please all raise your glasses? I would like to propose a toast to Mr. Eric Rosenberg, the progenitor of our afternoon together. Here's looking at you, my boy.
Oh, my goodness.
Well done. Ask away.
Ask away. Okay. Tough year. I'm a small business owner, and I'm looking at the future. What advice you have for me?
Looking at the future. One must look at the past before one looks at the future. History is our best teacher. Study history. Study history. Study history. In history lie all the secrets of statecraft. You must know what is. The further back that you can look, the further forward that you can see.
Love it. I believe that alone we can do nothing. So in terms of team, what is important as a leader when you're managing a team?
You must find your enemies and keep them close to you. I believe there have been many famous people in the past, but I would suggest you look at President Lincoln. President Lincoln assembled a team of rivals, did he not? He found those people who most assiduously opposed his policies and asked them to be part of his cabinet. You must do the same thing in business. You must find those people who are not afraid to, as you Americans call it, take you on, to disagree with you, because you must welcome it. I did the same thing. I studied President Lincoln as well, and I chose my fiercest enemies. You must find the best men and women, and not the yes men and women today, to help you, to ask those difficult questions of you, so that you might learn how better to run your company.
Awesome. Business owners responsible for team, and especially in our industry, not necessarily have the background in business and in finances. So what are your advice in terms of managing budget, managing finances, paying yourself first as a business owner?
I think you should hire somebody to do it. I was not the greatest financier that ever lived. Just get my wife involved. Clementine followed me around consistently and get me on the straight and narrow. Otherwise, we would not have been able to afford to live. We'd be eating beans and wieners out of a foxhole if it wasn't for her. So find somebody you can trust who's good with facts and figures. And don't be afraid, my dear friends, to spend money, to make money.
Very nice. And last, certainly not least, I do believe that success of a company starts with culture and aligning people on a common purpose, not the credo or the values that you stick in a poster in the lobby of the company, but truly lived every day. What's your take on it, Mr. Prime Minister?
You must have a vision, Eric. You must have a vision and be able to communicate it. I ask CEOs, I ask business leaders, I ask politicians consistently, what is it that you believe? What is your vision for the future? Do you know what it is? And can you communicate it? When you are in a meeting with your closest advisors and they leave, are you asking yourself, did I get through to them? Did I actually get the point across? Do they have the same fire in their bellies that I have? Do they have it? And if you don't, then you'd better figure out a way to find out what your vision is and communicate it. Because that vision must drive every single strategy that you have in your business. Let me give you an example. President Roosevelt in the White House interrupted me. I had just gotten out of the bathtub, and I was completely flagrante delicto. In other words, I had no clothes on, and I was talking to my secretary when he burst into the room with an entire retinue to congratulate me on a speech that I had given. And he turned around and ordered an about-face, and I stopped him, and I said, Mr. President, you must now know that the Prime Minister of England has absolutely nothing to hide from the President of the United States. Now, if you can learn how to take your clothes off in front of everybody, then you'll be a leader.
Oh, my God. That was phenomenal, Randy. And for all those who are listening, I'm so impressed by what you just did. For those, everybody's listening, I promise you, for everyone listening, you did not have any question in advance. We just had a conversation. It's just phenomenal what you're able to do. It reminds me when I was planning incentive trips and sales meeting and everything back in Europe. We had a program in London, and we're in one of the top beautiful hotel there, and brought a lookalike of Winston Churchill. My goodness, if I would have known you before, there's no way that I would pick anybody else. You're absolutely phenomenal. Randy, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for all your wisdom. I can't wait to see you face to face and have this great glass of, is it Scotch?
I'll drink just about anything, actually, Eric. You know me well enough by now to know that.
And a cigar, a Churchill cigar.
Scotch and a cigar. And might I also mention, you mentioned London. I am doing a tour. We're going to do it in September of 2022 when people hopefully feel safe. It'll be about a 10-day tour. We're going to stay at the top hotels. It's called Churchill's England, and I will be your host. So we will go from place to place. We'll be everywhere from Blenheim Palace in the background to the war rooms to even the burial site, and of course Chartwell and you name it. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're limiting it to 24 people, and we're going to do it during Elizabeth's 75th year, her Jubilee year. So, Randy, by the way, it's churchillspeaker.com for anybody who's interested.
That was my last question. How do people get in touch with you?
churchillspeaker.com. You can find it there, and I think it might be down here. My phone number is down on the bottom there as well. Love to talk with you. Love to talk with you about leadership. Love to talk with you about your company and what Winston Churchill might bring to the table to you and yours.
So churchillspeaker.com, and I'm just going to give the phone number because I really want to give you a lot of exposure. Love what you do. So it's 920-988 920-988-4459. Once again, 920-988-4459. Randy, Mr. Prime Minister, it's been an honor.
It's been an honor to speak with you, Eric, again. And cheers to everyone. Johnny Walker Red. That's not what this is. But because if it was, I'd be completely blasted all the time, wouldn't I? So here's looking at you, all of you. Cheers, and don't forget to keep buggering on. Yeah.
Thank you, Randy, for coming on the Business of Meeting podcast, or should I say Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill. I'm absolutely amazed by the way you are speaking like him, talking like him, talking about history and giving such great advice. Thank you so much. If you want to get in touch with me, please reach out on LinkedIn or join my Facebook group, www.eventbusinessformula.com/group, where we speak about everything related to owning your business in the meetings and event industry. Thank you.